All right, everyone, it is interview time. And today we are here with Kate Laurie, who is a fantastic author and a trauma-informed therapist who specializes in non-monogamy. And guess what? This episode will also share ideas, concepts, information, tips, tricks for folks who are monogamous, because a lot of the things that happen in non-monogamy also apply to monogamy, especially when it comes to communication skills. So whether you're monogamous or non-monogamous, this will likely have something for you. Maybe you're curious about non-monogamy. I don't know. But we will start with the same prompt that we give all of our guests. So Kate Laurie, can you please tell us how you got to where you are today in the field of sexuality?
Well, let's see. So I've been a psychotherapist for just short of 20 years. And when I came out to LA to get my master's degree in becoming a therapist, almost concurrently within a year, I met my partner that I would end up being non-monogamous with, and it ended up being a 13-year relationship and marriage. And so that was non-monogamous. And so even before I opened my practice that specialized in non-monogamy, I was having my own private non-monogamous journey. And so when I opened up my practice, I had clients before I even had a space, because most non-monogamous people want to go to somebody who's walked the walk. And so that's how that happened. And then concurrently, I've always been getting trained in trauma therapy, so EMDR, somatic psychotherapy. And so my approach very much dovetails those two things, which may seem, like, why do those two things need to be dovetailed? But as you talk to me, I think it'll become apparent. Because basically being happy within non-monogamy very much is about tracking your body and somatic grounding skills and all of that. And that is very much the realm of trauma therapists. A lot of them do a lot of somatic psychotherapy and that sort of thing. So it actually dovetails perfectly.
There's also the conversations involved in non-monogamy, right? If you're going to do it ethically, a lot of times. And that's one thing I really, before my question, I think folks out there that are unfamiliar with non-monogamy, they go, I don't want to say they go straight, but they go directly to a few different things. Polyamory. They're like, oh, you're talking about being polyamorous. And I'm like, no, it's not about that. Or, oh, you're talking about cheating. I'm like, no, it's not about that. There are so many different variations of non-monogamy. And I want to highlight that first. And then here comes the question. What are the attachment styles and how do they impact relationships in general, especially within non-monogamy?
Yeah, well, if you were to Google it, you'll see a different four. You'll see different combinations. I go by the Diane Poole Heller model. And so her four styles are a secure attachment style. This person with a secure attachment style has that background where their parents had their back, and basically they trust the world. They feel the world has their back, and then you got the other three, which are insecure attachment styles. So the ambivalent attachment style, sometimes you'll hear that being called anxious ambivalent, the avoidant, and the disorganized. So, within non-monogamy, the secure attachment style basically is, it's going to be easier for them because they believe that everything's going to work out. That's been their experience. Same thing in monogamous relationships. They probably are going to feel just more relaxed in it. And even if they had a breakup, they're like, I'm going to grieve, but I'll get over it. Whereas if you move to the anxious ambivalent style, within non-monogamy, they're that hover pilot going, what if my partner falls in love with someone else? What if I fall in love with someone else? Like they're a nervous Nelly and they're thinking, well, maybe if I wear more lingerie, that'll keep my partner bonded to me. Or maybe if I yell louder, then I'll get my way. They have it. And then in their head, they're very ambivalent about the relationship.
Okay, so I feel I am one of those ambivalent, avoidant, and also probably insecure humans. And my attachment style might be all. So would you say to me, if I were to work with you, that perhaps I shouldn't explore non-monogamy? Because even the thought of it being like, oh, even though there's no fucking security in monogamy because you don't own a person, but would you be like, or work on yourself first? Because I think that's something that people get stuck in, at least for me, the security that I desire with one person. I'm like, oh, what if they fall in love with someone else? What if there's pussies better than mine? And that's my insecurities, right?
Right. Well, you have to ask yourself that. But, when you think about somebody that, say, has a lot of attachment injuries. Maybe they have a lot of abandonment in their backstory. A therapist that looks through a monogamous lens would probably say, oh, you need to be monogamous because you need a secure base and you need to just know that your base is going to be there for you. And I can understand that lens of that therapist that would say that. But I could also argue that when you're non-monogamous and you have more than one partner, and it may be sexual or not, because there's asexual people that are non-monogamous, then it creates a safety net. So if one partner upsets you, passes away, leaves you, you have a safety net of some other people that are invested in you that have your back. And that safety net can really help somebody that has abandonment issues sometimes.
Totally. That's something I've thought about non-monogamy is with monogamy, we're kind of putting all our eggs in one basket. And if that basket somehow leaves us, isn't accessible for is or gone. And now we're going through a grieving process. And if we have multiple baskets, it's like, well, I don't have to go through this alone. And, I have these other partners. And that, of course, in monogamous relationships, like that's why we have friends and family and therapists. So you don't necessarily have to have other partners to feel like, okay, everything's all good. Mm-hmm. And I relate with April. So April, you're saying that you kind of relate to the more anxious piece of like, what if I'm not good enough?
Avoidant as well. So
you're avoidant too. Okay.
But, mostly anxious.
So avoidant, I think, was the next one you were going to talk about. A little more elaborate on.
And that's one reason some people just don't call it anxious. Sometimes they call it anxious ambivalent because a lot of folks that are anxious ambivalent do have that kind of push-pull dynamic a little bit. They don't think the relationship's perfect. They are scanning for what's wrong. So, it may be that you're more the anxious ambivalent type. And before I move on to avoidant, let me just briefly say that we're not locked in stone. Just as we heal, we can shift towards a secure attachment style. It's like, these things kind of set the groundwork in our past, but we can shift to a secure attachment style if we do the work. When you go to the avoidant style, that's that person, the quintessential example is that rock star that has a partner in every port. And even when they're home with their home base, they're sleeping on the sofa because they're making some excuse not to be with their partner, like that kind of extreme example. But, within a monogamous relationship, it can be incredibly painful to date that avoidant type because that's your everything person and they're not being there for you, right?
Oh my God, been there. It was hell. Well, not all the time, but with in a relationship with
you were with an avoidant,
highly avoidant person. You're like where an example of this would be, something would go wrong. Like I'm hurt about something. I express my hurt. Now they're upset about my hurt, and now they essentially are barely talking to me for 2 weeks, and it would get better. Like you're saying, we would work on it because I was with them for 5.5 years off and on, broke up 5 times, but through that, lots of hurt, and I won't go down that rabbit hole. But as we did the work with therapists and he did his own work and I was doing my work, it would instead of 2 weeks then it would now be like a week, and then it would be a couple days, and then be a couple hours. But for me, so as I kind of identify as someone who is as a secure attachment with very anxious tendencies. Yeah. Because I've been in relationships for, my first love for 4 years. We were both very secure there. And then we just became like housemates after year 3. And that one, then the sex wasn't really happening. Yeah. It was time to go, but we were young, and still learning. But yeah, that avoidance space to me is also, it's a representation of
that triggered your trauma, right?
My dad. Stuff, yeah. Right. My dad was also, that's kind of his way of dealing with stuff. And it would cause so much anxiety for me. And and it was hard to have compassion for the avoidant person because I'm like, you seem all good over there because you're like, I need my space. Don't call me. Don't talk to me. But I mean, I understand that it's not easy for the avoidant person either because likely deep down, they're probably going through their own stuff. It's just a different way of feeling challenge.
Yeah. So one thing, they've done some studies on people who seem just calm and cool and they're pulling away, and they've done studies on what's going on in them physiologically. And sometimes they're more jacked up than the person that's anxious. So it can be very misleading. But Sue Johnson wrote a book called Hold Me Tight that is exactly about this, where this person, it's the chicken or the egg kind of thing. So if this person withdraws, this person usually gets bigger. Like maybe if I yell louder, maybe if I, nag them more. And this kind of dynamic happens where this person's getting bigger and this one's pulling away more. And if that keeps happening, they'll head towards a breakup or a divorce. And so the job is for this person to dial it down and this person to come forward, and so you can, and when it comes to non-monogamy, you can imagine that it might be a little bit easier if this person is not your primary partner. I'm
not doing avoidant anymore. Sorry. No avoidant people. Like
right.
if avoidance your go-to, just I'm screening that out in the beginning.
And the good news is you said that people can move through these, right? With healing their what's happening to trigger these attachment styles. You can heal. I don't have to be anxious and anymore, right? Right?
Yeah.
Please tell me. Please tell me.
If you get the right care or you use the right strategies, then yes, you can heal for sure. But one thing is to realize if you're in one of these relationships with somebody who, no matter what you do, they aren't willing to do the work like you had in your relationship, and they just keep pulling away, that's probably going to be re-traumatizing your own abandonment issues and all sorts of things. And you certainly don't want to move them into a primary position within non-monogamy, because then you're in that same situation where you don't have that main person that's there for you. And in fact, if you move somebody who's more in a secondary or tertiary position within non-monogamy to primary, you might think, oh, well, now they're going to show up for me. But once they're in that primary position with more responsibility and pressure, they usually get worse than what they were before, And then you move on to the disorganized style, and usually they are the ones with the worst backstories. Not everybody with a trauma history ends up being a disorganized style, just like not everybody with a horrible backstory ends up having borderline personality disorder, But that person has a tendency to be more erratic, and they have more chaos in their life, and they tend to have a lot of pain, and their partners tend to experience a lot of pain. And you can imagine that when you combine that with non-monogamy, which is a more complicated relationship model because it pokes at our attachment injuries more, that could get pretty explosive.
Yeah. I would imagine, and I am someone who has not explored not full on non-monogamy, and like April said, that means so many things. I am monogamish. I've done the kind of play party things, or like threesome things, or some unethical non-monogamy in that hurtful relationship there, where there was a lot of things happening outside of the relationship that was not being shared and was not part of the relationship agreement there. And bringing this back to the monogamy piece, because I know we're talking about non-monogamy. So these attachment styles, they show up everywhere, no matter who we're in relationship with. Yeah, they're showing up everywhere. And so so is it really important or helpful to understand your attachment style and for your partners to understand theirs, like do a deeper dive in that so that we know how to work together?
I think it can be a good anchor to help you look at things. And I just want to say one little sentence. Again, just because you have a bad backstory does not mean you're going to end up being a disorganized attachment style. It does not mean that you can't do non-monogamy. There's plenty of people who do non-monogamy or monogamy with a hard backstory, and they pull it off and they have a glorious life. I don't want to make people feel hopeless or helpless in any way. Let's see. And then, I think it can be super helpful. And I think it's a good way to talk to your partner about dynamics that are happening within the relationship. Because guess what? A lot of times the anxious ambivalent type does date the withdrawn type, the avoidant type.
Yep.
And then they exacerbate their patterns. And if they understand that that's what's going on, then it kind of cuts down someone saying, it's all your fault, or it's all your fault. And then they realize, oh, it's the combination of me and you together that's exacerbating this problem. And then once you recognize it, then there's kind of ways to move through it.
It's pretty incredible that there's so many humans on the planet, yet somehow we all sit within these four realms of categories of attachment styles that we don't. Right. Yeah. It's still just pretty, but I feel like categorically speaking, you can figure that out through, I'm sure, your work. You can help folks, and we'll get to that later, because I know people out there that will have no idea what we're talking about when we're talking about attachment style, and they won't know what they are. They're like, I don't know, I might be all of those things, or I don't fit with any of those things. So we'll have to get clear for folks out there that are curious about their attachment style and how to do that.
Well, one thing I want to throw in the dating world that I've done and suggested to people, as someone who's like pretty clear that I really don't want to date people who are highly avoidant. It's just it's just not really, I know it doesn't work well for me, and I'm not really willing to do that. There's plenty of other fish in the sea, and I'm not all avoidant folks. Love you. Yeah, but just you're not, and I don't work well with you. And so one of the questions that I would ask in the dating world, like, so say April and I are on a date. She loves this example. I'm gonna stop saying that. But so April and I, we were going on our first date, and we're like, hey, nice to meet you. And we get to know each other a little bit. And, I also like to be like, so do you ever do therapy? I just go into those places. So I'm not saying you guys y'all have to do that. But at some point what I would ask someone is, when things are really hard in relationships, like think of like your past relationships, when things get really hard, what do you usually do? Are you someone who needs some space, like needs to kind of like run or get away or get like really remove yourself from the situation? Are you someone that kind of like really wants to work it out and it's really, really important to work it out right now? Or do you feel like you're someone who's kind of can just chill and like be in your space and just like, okay, let's work.
I would run, because you should have waited for the third date.
If I did see, yeah, then she'd be out, and then we wouldn't be compatible. Yeah, that would be perfect. Yeah, but that, and maybe I wouldn't ask that. I probably actually know myself. I'd probably ask that on the first date, but it'd probably be like hour 2.
Yeah. And you can find quizzes online to help you figure out your attachment style. And also you'll probably notice that over the course of your life, when you think about the different people that you dated, some people probably, brought out a particular style in you. And you might have kind of flip-flopped a little bit across your life. So, it's a little bit more complicated than the 4 model, the 4 styles indicate, but it does give you kind of at least a way to think about things.
Some kind of map. I like that.
Love maps.
So, okay. How do people know if they are non-monogamous? What's the difference between fantasy, or I want to get my needs met, my partner's not doing that, and desire? Can you kind of go deeper into that?
Yeah. Well, first off, and I think your previous guest was even talking about this, sometimes we eroticize things that in our childhood scared us, or even something. This is going to sound like I'm being tangential. Like, let's face it, like a lot of women, their biggest fantasy might be a ravishment fantasy, but in real life, a rape would be their worst fear, right?
Yeah, it's me right here.
Yep. Right. And so, same thing with cuckold fantasies and so many others. And so you may have a fantasy about non-monogamy that's super hot in your head, and you have to really ask yourself, like, does this need to stay neatly tucked away in my head, or do I need to kind of unfold this and see? And I think a lot of times people don't know. So oftentimes I'll have a couple, and one person is like, I'm going to be jealous. This is going to be super hard for me. I want to try it, but this is going to be hard. Another person is like, this is going to be great. I'm going to be the peacock. I'm going to be strutting my stuff, and they go to the party and it's right the opposite. It is right the opposite. Wow. The jealous one is like the belle of the ball. And she's like, oh my God, I never thought it was going to be like this. This is amazing. And then this person is like, I thought I was going to get a whole bunch of lovers the first night and nobody even talked to me. And
this makes me want to try this.
Yeah, April's into it.
Because I'm always like, I'm going to go. I'm going to be so jealous. I'll be like, look at it.
Oh, that was like when we went to go watch the vulva demonstration. I was like, I got this. I've been in front of so many genitals and seen demonstrations. And like April, I was like, this might be hard for April. And I was the one like, this is a lot. And April's like, interesting.
I was like, what about a little bit more to the left?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I was like, oh my God, she was the belle of the ball.
Right. And so I always tell people, go slow. Maybe first just go to a lecture, like say here in LA, it would be the Pleasure Chest, and then go and get some wine and talk about it. Then maybe go to a party that's at a bar where there's no play, and just talk to people that are non-monogamous. Or then maybe go to a play party, but again, you don't play, you just kind of watch and like slowly ease into it and then talk about it. A lot of people that are non-monogamous, they kind of fall in love under a 6th love language that you might call carefree, fun, freedom, and adventure. So they tend to be like Tigger and want to like romp, down doing backflips towards non-monogamy. And then, and then they go to 3 play parties right in a row. And then they come limping into my office because they've been together for 15 years and they've been good business partners, good family partners, this and that. And they thought it would all translate. And they didn't realize that entering non-monogamy, they'd be like a little baby falling on their butt and falling on their face. And it's a whole new ballgame of trust, And so I'm always trying to get people to go slower.
So not straight for the orgy or gangbang, like right away.
Go to the voyeur, go as a voyeur.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You have to keep in mind that in the land of non-monogamous, speakers, etc. I'm a little bit like mom. I have a lot more. I have a lot of clients that are porn performers and escorts. I kind of joke that I'm the porn star mom, so I'm like mom being like, go slower, honey, and then I'm also always trying to tell people to track their body, like track your body. Don't ignore if you feel that knife drop inside. If you feel the knife drop inside when your partner asks for something, that does not mean that non-monogamy is wrong for you. It doesn't mean that whatever they're asking for is wrong. It means you need to sit with it, get grounded, get connected to your mind and your sensations and your emotions from a grounded, centered place. Whatever you need to do, meditate, go on a walk, go for a jog, whatever it takes to get centered in your body, and then ask yourself what's going on. It might take getting in touch with that moment and getting in touch with it emotionally and somatically, and then bridge back to the first or worst memory that pops up for you that somatically and emotionally feels similar. Maybe it was a time that, your parents drove away with your sister Sally while they were howling laughing, and you were left at the gas station watching the car drive away. And you're like, oh, they used to favor her all the time. I'm getting triggered because I'm fearful of being left, and my old memories of those injuries are getting triggered. Now I know what I need to ask of my partner. I know what my self-work needs to be, and it may change what you say. Or you might come back and just be like, no, dude, that I am not okay with that. Let's talk. But it's going to be a conversation, right? Because within non-monogamy, there's sometimes many partners involved, and they all deserve to have a voice.
This is kind of a tangent from the next question we were going to ask, but I'm curious. So you work with a lot of porn stars, and so they're people who are in relationships with people, but they're having sex with other people as a part of their career. And so you're working with them around their, sometimes maybe they are non-monogamous people, but and I don't know if I would even put that in the category of non-monogamy. That's because that's like their profession. But I'm just kind of curious a little bit about that.
Yeah. And I also get the partners of porn performers and high-end escorts. And basically some porn performers regard themselves as monogamous. They do regard that as their job, and then there's other porn performers that are non-monogamous when they're off work, and they may vary and flow. So there's all of that. I think one of the problems comes with sometimes the partner feels like their partner is non-monogamous because they are sleeping with different people on the job, and they might get into arguments about that, where the porn star is like, this is my job. Do you know how many cameras are on me? Do you know how, like in between scenes, we're scratching our asses, like to them, it may in a lot of ways, be just work, and they may enjoy their work. I'm not saying that they don't, but they sometimes get into arguments about that, especially if the porn performer wants to be monogamous.
Yeah.
It'd be the same with it's the same with the big blockbuster actors as well, right? When you're doing hot, steamy scenes with some handsome or beautiful human, and then Brad Pitt left
Jennifer Aniston for Angelina Jolie. Just kidding. I don't know if that's what really happened.
No, that is what happened on Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
They needed you. Where were you, Lori?
I'm only relating that because porn star or not, yes, there's penetration, but there's cameras, and there's an intimate exchange of bodies being held together. And whether you're acting, you're performing, no matter if you're on Mr. and Mrs. Smith or on Pirates version 5.
That's a porn, everyone.
Yeah, that's a porn. Porn.
With that, when I have a client like that, I am not there to dictate what's right or wrong. I'm just there to help them work through that and help both people see the other person's side and try and find some middle ground that they can live with, or if they can agree, like help them work. If they end up breaking up, like help them with that. I'm not dictating what's right or wrong, but I do understand it. And, I think a lot of porn performers also come to me because maybe they're grieving their grandma and they don't want a therapist that is like, well, the reason you're sad is because you're a porn performer. You know what I mean?
Judgy therapist.
Hell no.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot. Totally. Yeah. Or like kink shaming, or finding the right person to work with. So I'm going to combine these two just as clarification for April right here. So when people get triggered, so because we talked about like some of the ways, like examples of when attachment styles and triggering. So when people actually get triggered with their partner, and I'm going to actually just combine this with monogamous and non-monogamous. So you're triggered. What are some of the tools for, wow, I'm feeling really triggered right now, that maybe apply more so to non-monogamy, but could also be applicable to monogamy as well?
And I kind of touched on it before, but let's clarify it a little bit. So imagine there's two partners that are at a play party. And, what names do we want to use? Josie and
Amy and April.
Amy and April. Okay. Amy and April.
We're at a play party. Woo! Finally.
Amy and April are at a play party. And it's one of your birthdays.
It's April's birthday.
It's April's birthday. And for some reason, Amy just keeps on flirting with other folks.
Woo, you're like, oh, yeah.
Amy's just flirting with other folks. And April inside is like getting pretty upset, but isn't saying anything, doesn't want to cause drama, blah, blah, blah. But on the ride home, Amy and April get into a massive fight. And there's,
I'm like, bitch, you're not getting late tonight when we get home.
What do you mean? We were at a play party, and that's what we do at play parties. And I gave
let her finish.
Okay. Right. No, but that's helpful. And so the next morning, April wakes up and April's able to like kind of calm down a little bit and all of that. And so, the first thing April can do is sit with it. And again, get in touch with it somatically and emotionally, bridge back. And she does see that it connects back to feeling left and abandoned when she was younger. And so at that point, she can ask herself, okay, what was Amy's part in it? Well, dude, it was my birthday and that sucked.
No, it was my birthday.
Oh, it was April's birthday. Yeah. So it's like, okay, yes, April can go, I have abandonment issues and maybe I need to work on that. But also it was my birthday and it was sucky. It's like both, right? Totally. And because they are non-monogamous in this scenario, this gets more complicated. And so April may come to Amy and might say, I get that maybe I need to do like some EMDR or some meditation or some grounding to heal some of my abandonment injuries. And that's my responsibility. But dude, it was my birthday. Like,
all I wanted was a deep anal fisting from you, and you couldn't even give it to me for my birthday.
Also, it was my day, and you kind of just went out and it seemed like you were just doing your own thing.
So it's taking ownership of your own feelings and addressing those, and not doing this blame situation like you made me feel this way.
It's your fault.
So, and that I think is where the time comes into play. And that takes a lot, even for folks that have a lot of experience with emotional intelligence. For when you're triggered or experiencing these really difficult feelings that are bringing up something that's deeply sometimes rooted within you, and you don't even know why it's there, and you just want to like lash out or be mad. It is so hard to take a step back. And I'll speak for myself. I know for me, I do so much work around this. I meditate every single day. I do breath work every day. I exercise, and still sometimes I find myself when I get triggered just lashing out, and it's so difficult. And so I want everyone out there to know that you can do it. Be gentle with yourself. And every day is a new day. That's what I tell myself every time I have a lash out. I'm like,
more work to do.
Yes, more work. So I love that though, that suggestion.
Yeah. And if you can afford EMDR and you're catching something continuing to get triggered, EMDR is a great way to really clear out some things that you have trouble clearing out on your own. Another thing that I'd say, going back to the party, maybe April notices all of this, but April is like, you know what? We've been in therapy. Our therapist has taught us about how to take a proper time out or to get out of this situation. And maybe in advance, they figured out some way to get out of the party without causing drama, like saying, oh, I just got this text from my mom. I need to take you out of the party and talk to you. Some little white lie that gets you out of there without anybody even knowing what's going on. And then you could have a conversation. It may be that if you don't just bear through the whole party and you bring your partner out and you have a little sidebar conversation, it may be that you can move through this without it escalating. You know, that's another thing that I would say is that there's no reason to just bear through things. There's ways to address things without it causing drama in front of others, whether you're monogamous or non-monogamous. That's another thing I'd say.
I like that because I've always been taught to bear through it.
Oh yeah. Tolerate
And just deal. And it'll get, you're stronger than that. Anyway, it's not about me. I'm not trying to make this about me. I'm just relating to what you're saying in a way that's really, that helped me feel safe right there. Thank you.
Yeah.
So if we talk about some of because we've covered so much about non-monogamy, but if folks want tips for navigating non-monogamous relationships, and maybe they're not necessarily going to do that, but could these tips also apply to monogamy as well? And if you have any, I don't know, top 3, 4, 5 tips for navigating non-monogamy, that would be really cool.
Yeah. I think all of this can apply to monogamy as well. Another thing that I would add, is just if you're having a hard conversation, like April and Amy were in the drive, during the drive home.
I'm sorry, Chip.
that it's okay to take what I call a proper timeout. Most of my clients that come to my practice, their timeout goes like this: screw you, and slamming the door and stomping out, right? Mm-hmm. And that leaves the person that's left feeling, wondering if they're being broken up with, wondering if the conversation is being disrespected, wondering if they're being disrespected. So if you're able to get, we're tracking our body. So we're noticing when we're going towards a rage, which might mean, oh, when I start to feel heat in my face, that means I'm about to lose it. Like if you're tracking your body, you can get in front of that moment where you lose your shit, right? Mm-hmm. So, and with a lot of my clients, whether it's rage and they punch a hole in the wall, or whether it's binge eating or whatever it is, at first they'll say there is no window. I go from calm to seeing red, but if all you need is 30 seconds, man. And then you can put a little, it's like the bicycle wheel is going on and it's like putting a stick in that wheel that's going around. So if you're able to get in front of, you just need 30 seconds, and then you can do a proper timeout and just be and address those things. I love you. I'm not abandoning the conversation. I just need to calm down, and I'll come back in 15 minutes, an hour, a day, whatever it is. That's way better than what most people do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gives some reassurance.
The time frame is important because I've had partners leave before, and it's so scary because that piece of abandonment, like, you're leaving me, I'm not worthy, and then you just suffer and you cycle, right? And even if it's tomorrow, at least give me something, right? Something.
Yeah. Or when you come back, so if you're an hour and you come back and you're like, hey, I know I said an hour, but I still need more time, then
you send a text or something. I need more time.
Yeah, let's set more time. We can still be clear about that, but don't leave someone hanging there just oh my God, I don't know what to do. It's
a complete game changer. It can save relationships just making that switch and how you do a timeout. Mm-hmm. So going to your question about, some tips with non-monogamy. I mean, all of this has been tips, but I think one thing that's important is, this applies to monogamy as well, is choose a kind partner who is not entitled, who is not a narcissist. Now, in non-monogamy, you can see how non-monogamy can actually be a narcissistic supply source. I don't know if you guys have heard that term. Like narcissists, because they don't really experience love or give love, they need something else. Like for most human, love is like our gas. It's our sun, it's our water, it's our soil. Narcissists don't really, they may think they're in love, but they don't really understand love in the way a lot of other folks do. So they end up needing another narcissistic supply source, whether it's, jewelry, a whole bunch of hot lovers on their arm, like fancy cars, money, fame. That's their narcissistic supply. So you can see how non-monogamy can create this massive narcissistic supply. And so they'll usually choose an overgiver, somebody who is codependent.
Been there, no comment, been there, but they just commented, been there.
that will enable that. And so that dynamic, non-monogamy can be gorgeous. It can be wonderful and fulfilling and yummy and all these good things. But that combo that happens a lot is just a recipe for pain for the overgiver.
We didn't even go into unethical or non-ethical and ethical non-monogamy, right? Because there are different ways to do it. And we don't have to go that far into that, but I feel as though it is a point to touch on because, and not that all narcissists would do that. However, a lot of times when you hear these horror stories about my partner cheated, told me that he loved me, and then he was out banging out, 15 broads. I don't even like that word, but I just want to say it. At the IHOP. I don't know. Wherever people go these days.
That is a busy day at IHOP. Wow.
No, sorry.
Not sponsored by IHOP, everyone, just so you know.
I don't even like pancakes. So I'm getting to a point here. So but can you talk a little bit about in terms, because what you were talking about this entire episode is ethical non-monogamy and doing it in an ethical way. When people think of non-monogamy, sometimes they think of the cheater, the narcissist, and that would be an unethical way to be non-monogamous, which would encompass lying or covering their own asses, or right. So I don't know if you want to talk about anything,
yes.
And the differences. Up to you. But
and by the way, not all cheaters are narcissists. Just want to be clear about the distinction between.
And not all psychopaths are killers.
Oh yeah, all right. And not all dogs are cats. All right. Anyways.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is why a lot of academics, when you research and pull up articles that are coming out of universities, they'll use consensual non-monogamy rather than ethical non-monogamy, because how did non-monogamous people get to be the people that gets to determine what's ethical? And clearly somebody could be polyamorous or a swinger and be doing it in a non-ethical way that is harming their partner, not just because maybe they're breaking relationship agreements, but maybe because they have no compassion or empathy, right? And so, this whole idea of it makes more sense to use the term consensual non-monogamy, but we could argue that too. Like, how are you sure that somebody is given consent? Surely some people that have a backstory where they have learned to be a fawner, do the fawn response, that can carry over into your adulthood, and you might say yes to things, but it's not really a true yes. So even switching from ethical non-monogamy to consensual non-monogamy still can be questionable, but it's better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. So we're in the process of writing our own book, and I'm like, do we say ethical or consensual? So
I like that. I like the differences.
We're gonna have to go and do
pointed out
edits, maybe.
Yes.
All right. So speaking of books, not about our book, your book. So I'm sure so much of this is in the book. So your book is Open Deeply: A Guide to Conscious, Compassionate Non-Monogamy. Can you tell our listeners? I mean, you told a lot. You gave us a lot of info, but kind of like what this book is about, who it's for, like what else might be in there that they might be interested in learning.
Yes. So, basically there's other books that have come out before this book, obviously, on non-monogamy, like The Ethical Slut came out, I think, in 1998, and it's had revisions. And if you still Google it on Amazon, it still is like the number one. But, and it's a brilliant book. And I love Dosey and Janet, but it's a 101 book. And so clients would come into my practice and they had read that and other books before even the first session. And they're like, we're in our first month of non-monogamy and already we feel completely lost. And so I tried to put tons of vignettes all through my book. They listed and addressed how to handle the most common things that I see in and out of my practice, just filled with very concrete vignettes that people can use. Because a lot of times people will talk theoretically, but they won't just like get down to the nitty gritty of how things unfold. Like in that example I gave with April and Amy,
That's us.
So that's one thing. And then two, I talk about all the things that I talked about in this episode, talking about how attachment injuries impact non-monogamy and attachment styles, triggers, how to ground yourself, how to do a proper timeout, like all of that. But there's a lot more in it. I talk about things like positive affect tolerance and why that's important. I talk about why compassion is important for yourself and others. I talk about coming out as a non-monogamous person. There's a ton more that's in there that's just as crucial as anything that we talked about in this episode.
Okay, so where can people not only find your book, but if they want to find you or work with you? I just have to tell you, you just made me feel so safe. I absolutely, and
I
just,
want to work with you.
I just feel like you have this empathetic skill set that's really beautiful, and so thank you. And I just wanted to give you that really incredible piece of information about yourself that I feel.
Thank you.
You are fantastic.
I appreciate that. As far as finding me, you can find my website at kateloree.com. So that's Kate, LOREE.com. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Open Deeply with Kate Loree. Honestly, on any social media, if you just type in Kate Loree, I'll pop up because it's an unusual enough name to find me. And Open Deeply, you can purchase it wherever books are sold.
I just realized I said your name like Lori so many times. Loree, Kate Loree. Sorry about
That's okay.
that.
No worries at all.
No siento.
I really loved all of this and just the amount of compassion that you show, I think all levels of relationships, wherever they are at in non-monogamy or if they're monogamous. And I hope that you folks listening out there, I hope that you've taken away as much as we have from all of Kate's information, and go check out Open Deeply. The key to unlocking your most conscious relationships, whether you want to choose non-monogamy or you want to be monogamous, is knowledge and guidance. And it sounds like your book is the proper tool for that. So thank you so much, Kate. I hope we have you back again because I loved hanging out with you. And I love all of our Shameless Sex listeners out there in the world of listening land, wherever you are located. If you can just take one moment right now and go to iTunes and now Spotify and give us a 5-star rating. We read every single one. Amy, she filters out the bad ones because, again, I'm so anxious I can't read them. There aren't. That's why we need a lot. However, we need you. If you love us as much as we love you, we need you. And you're 5 stars too. Why? Because it helps more people find folks like Kate and her work. And it helps the world have shameless sex. And we thank you for being a part of the Shameless Sex Revolution, y'all. We will see you next Tuesday. Ciao for now.